Now, I know a few people are going to say that this is going to be an unfair review, and I don't agree. I think that the ZR2 and the Ford Tremor are very close to the same truck. Now, I will say, it could be unfair depending on who's saying it. But we're going to do this video anyways because they're both cool off-road trucks and they're very unique and very similar in their own way. Special shout out to Jerry Seiner Chevrolet here in Salt Lake City and Larry H. Miller Super Ford store in Salt Lake City. They both allowed me to do this test. They have a great inventory of pickup trucks and everything else that you can imagine. And yeah, if you do buy a car, let them know you saw the video. I've done a few videos on the ZR2 now, and I've had a chance to drive it. And I think that this is one of the best hardcore off-roaders in the market. And I just did a video on this truck, and let's just say this is like the more adult off-roader, as I call it, the more business casual, because they don't use red accents, things like that, kind of like how you see on this ZR2. They use like this burnt orange color, and let's face it, I think it looks really good and it looks really grown up. That's just a fact. Now, don't get me wrong, this truck here is just, it is pretty hardcore. I mean, the bumper design, like check that out. Look at that cutout right there. The reason why they do that obviously is to give you a better approach angle if you are going off-road. And while we're down here, I love the way that they designed the fog lights too. Huge skid plate, finished in aluminum, and look how far back it goes. I mean, it goes back for days. Red tow hooks, really aggressive front grille, and it's probably the most extreme truck in this lineup right here. But the Ford does look aggressive too. As I mentioned, you have these burnt orange accents on the front. You have this grayed out front grille, blacked out headlights, and it too has a pretty darn big skid plate that is finished in aluminum, and it goes back pretty darn far. But let's go ahead and talk about where the Chevy takes the win up front. I gotta hop inside to show it to you because I don't want to get on this wet ground. You see that? This has a front and rear locker. Hopefully you can see it right there. I love the fact that Chevy gave that to you on the ZR2. Don't count the Ford out quite yet. Ford does have a rear locker. Now that is a great advantage to have if you're going off-road, especially if you're not that experienced. Having those lockers front and rear are a huge advantage. Now here's where the Ford takes a win. We got to give the Ford a win, obviously. Now for 2023, they did decide to allow you to get a 5-liter V8 for the Tremor. That is huge because in the past you only could get the twin turbo V6. Now that is what's under the hood of this pickup truck. And if you do decide to get the 5-liter V8, the only downside is power. It has 400 horsepower, 410 pound-feet of torque compared to the 6.2-liter V8 that's found inside the ZR2. Now this is going to have 420 horsepower, 460 pound-feet of torque, but this is the only option available for this truck. This is great power, but let's jump back over to the Ford. This twin-turboed V6 makes 400 horsepower. You ready for this? And 500 pound-feet of torque. So this does not have the horsepower advantage over the ZR2, but the torque, it has 40 pound-feet more torque. And I'm willing to bet you that this truck would beat the ZR2 in a drag race. Not because of anything other than I think this truck is a little bit lighter, and we'll look at that in a second. But let's go ahead and move on to the next point. Most people know this by now. Ford and GM did collaborate on the 10-speed transmission in these two trucks. And so there's no advantage there, and that's why I didn't really talk about it. But let's look at the wheel and tire setup. Now, I want you guys in the comment section to let me know what you think. I drove a ZR2 about a month or so ago, and I thought that this truck drove better than a Trail Boss. So the tires that you're looking at here are the Goodyear Wrangler, and these are the Territory MTs. very aggressive, and quite honestly, I think that they look slightly better than what's on the Ford here. I mean, you can even see the sidewalls here, how they have that aggression right there. And the wheel design is even more menacing. I do like the overall brake design too. You have the 4-piston brakes right there. And here's the capacity for the tire. 2,680 pounds at 50 PSI, which makes this an LT tire. So this is a 275/70/18. Now here's why I think that the Ford F-150 Tremor does kind of compete with the ZR2. This does have 33-inch tires, just like the ZR2, 275/70/18. Now, I've owned General tires in the past on cars and SUVs. These are great tires. These are the Grabber ATs, and they're pretty darn aggressive. They're not as aggressive as the Goodyears, but overall, they do have a great tread pattern. And on top of that, they have great capacity. So these are going to have a little bit more capacity than ZR2. 2,756 pounds, and believe it or not, this is not even an LT tire. So that's something that I would like to see from them, is to add an LT. But all in all, the tire does have more capacity. Now while we're down here, you're going to have a sport tune suspension, and when you get a Tremor, they do give you special Tremor shock absorbers. Now let me show you guys out back here. You can kind of see it a little bit better. So there you go. Out back, you can see it has that Tremor badge on the back of the shock absorber. And they are using leaf springs. And here's a better look at the front suspension. As I mentioned, independent front suspension there. And there's a little bit of aluminum on the suspension too. But overall, just pretty much what you see on most of the other Ford F-150s. Now as far as the suspension goes, this is where I think the ZR2 really does take the win 100%. Now we're going to walk back to the rear. Now if you look at a Trail Boss or any Silverado, they're going to have a different leaf spring setup compared to the ZR2. They do give you 5 leaves in the main pack. This is kind of similar to what you see on the HD trucks. Now you can probably see that gold and blue color. Let me see if I can show it to you better up front, so you guys can probably see it better like this. So this does have Multimatic DSSV, and that's going to stand for Dynamic Suspension Spool Valve. So this thing can adjust. It's good for heat, you know, so if you're going off-road and you're doing like a lot of intense driving, this suspension is going to stand the test of time, and it's built for the application that you see here. Now obviously I can't be biased. If you get a Raptor, you're going to get something pretty similar to what you see on this Silverado. And the only reason why I did this test is because of pricing. So I will go over that at the end of this video. But let's move into the interior. I want to show you guys some of the things between these two trucks. GM did a phenomenal job with this interior. I think that the overall fit and finish is top notch. You have soft touch up here, nice trim pieces. You have like a black chrome appearance right there. And I like the lime green accents on the door here. And check out the seats too. They do provide extra bolstering, and these seats are a little bit softer too compared to the other Silverados. And then check out the additional bolstering that they do. You have that same color design with that lime stitching. And overall, I mean, you get a power steering column, you get a digital gauge cluster, and a 13.4-inch display there. And I mean, it's easy to get in and out of the truck too. Love the overall dash design too. They've done a great job with this truck. Even the position of where the charger is great. You have USBs inside of here with a power plug, and you have 2 more USBs, Type A and Type C. And then check out just the overall graphic design. I really think that they did a great job with this truck. And as you guys saw, you know, that locker front and rear. Now here's where I think Ford does have an advantage on this truck, and it's going to be your drive mode. So if you push the button, you can see this does have tow haul mode. It does pop up right there, you can see. And if I swipe it counterclockwise, you have terrain, so you have to be in 4 high for that. You also have off-road, and then you just have normal. Now with the Ford, the interior design is kind of a toss-up, but as I've mentioned, this is the more grown-up truck in my opinion. I think that depending on what you're going for, I think that this one's more classy compared to the Chevy Silverado. You also have that power steering column, and then check out your seats. See, these seats are pretty big, and they have nice bolstering, just like that Chevy Silverado does. And I like the accents too, especially on the steering wheel. They have that stitching there, and you also have a digital gauge cluster and a 12-inch display as well in this truck. And those pedals down below are power. I do like the fact that this one does have the running boards. The Silverado does not have those. Now, as I was saying, this truck does have the Silverado Beat with the driving mode. So you ready for this? So you have Sport, Eco, tow haul mode, normal, slippery, deep snow and sand, mud ruts, rock crawl, and that's it. Notice how I did lose my Chevy Silverado ZR2, so someone is actually here looking at it, which is cool. But one thing I like about the Ford is the fact that it does have a torque on-demand transfer case, which is pretty similar to what Chevy has. I think Chevy was one of the first ones to use that automatic full drive system basically. This does have trail control, which is basically cruise control for off-road. You also have trail one pedal drive too. And listen, I have gone off-road, not to extremes, but I have had opportunities to take trucks off-road. And one thing I will say is, these features that they give you do help make it a little bit easier if you are a beginner at doing this type of stuff. So trail one pedal drive, you know, it is an option to have, but when it is engaged, it does automatically apply the brakes whenever the driver lifts off the accelerator. So that way, all you have to do is just worry about, you know, accelerating if you are like going over rocks, things like that. But let me go ahead and show you guys the payload number in this truck, and then if I get the Chevy Silverado ZR2 back, I'll show that one to you too, which I'm sure I will, because I think they have maybe another one out here somewhere too, so I could probably use that one as my example. So this truck does have a gross axle weight rating out front at 3,600 pounds. The rear is 3,800 pounds, and it does have a 7,000 pound GWR, and then all-in payload capacity is going to be 1,589 pounds. And I did give a more comprehensive view of the window sticker in another video, but here's some of the options for this truck. And all in, this truck was $72,465. And then here are the numbers for the ZR2. So you're gonna have a gross axle rating out front at 3,800 pounds, and the rear is gonna be the same, with a 7,100 pound GWR. And all in, your payload capacity is gonna be 1,447 pounds. And all in, this truck is only $76,310 versus $72,000. So I think for what you're getting, you really have to look at both packages to get an idea of what makes more sense for you. And one thing I didn't mention, this does have a 323 versus Ford's 373. But I hope this video was helpful. Special shout out to Jerry Seiner Chevrolet and Larry H. Miller Super Ford here in Salt Lake City. Be sure to give these guys a look out if you are in the market, and hopefully if the Silverado does not sell, I will do a drive video for both trucks. It is very rare to have a Tremor and a ZR2 in the same setting. See you guys in the next video.